Hey everybody, welcome back. So we're going to continue on with body paragraphs. So for this video, we're going to be going through this thing that I like to call the body paragraph formula, and then go into the details of each of those parts of that formula and what makes a body paragraph. And lastly, we'll look at incorporating an appeal, which we briefly went over what is an appeal in the introduction. And I know some of this agenda is a little repetitive, little typo there, but all right. So let's get right into it. The body paragraph formula. What does a body paragraph look like in this essay? All right, so there's 6 things in a body paragraph. There's your topic sentence, and then you transition or lead in to your concrete detail or the quote that you chose, and then you cite that piece of evidence. Following that, you analyze why you chose that piece of evidence to support your thesis, and then you wrap it all up with a concluding sentence. Now, there are many other ways that teachers may have labeled or named these parts of a body paragraph, but this is, I think, pretty standard for what most teachers and professors use in relation to what makes the parts of a body paragraph. So here's that formula that I was talking about. You may have seen the abbreviations that I have over here on the right hand side, the TS, CDCOM, COM, CDCOM, COM, CS. May have used it in instructions for discussion threads, or you may have seen some of the actual terms itself, like CED for concrete detail or COM for commentary, also in our instructions or on the essay outline. So, what do these things stand for? TS stands for topic sentence. CD stands for concrete detail, COM or commentary for analysis, and CS for concluding sentence. Now, if you notice in the breakdown of the formula itself, it doesn't have abbreviations for the transition or lead-in or your citations. And this is often something that I would forget when I was writing my essays, so make sure not to leave that out if you're someone who finds this formula useful. Include your lead-in and your citation. It was always assumed that you would remember your lead-ins and your citations, and I often lost a lot of points for that in my essays because I would write this formula down on like the right hand side of my paper, and I just didn't have a little reminder that I needed a lead-in or a citation. All right, let's go in depth into each of these parts of the body paragraph. So we're going to go through each of the things: topic sentence, lead-in, evidence, citation, analysis, and concluding sentence. And we're going to get us started with the topic sentence. So this is the very first sentence of the body paragraph. This is where you're going to tell your reader what you're going to be discussing and one of the topics that's addressed in your thesis statement. So this is how your topic sentence will end up tying back to the thesis statement that you wrote at the beginning. And in a sense, the topic sentence itself is like a thesis statement for this paragraph. It is also an arguable claim, a controlling idea for this paragraph. And just like the thesis, all of your evidence, your analysis, anything that you're including in this body paragraph supports what this topic sentence is addressing. So if we look over to the example on the right, this is kind of based off of prompt number 3. Star's family is a controlling factor in the power of her voice. So in this short statement, we can see that there's already a claim being made. The writer themselves believe that Star's family is the one that has the power over her voice. And so this kind of gives us that direction. In bullet number 2 over here, tells the reader what you will be discussing in the paragraph. This tells the reader that they're going to provide examples of how Star's family controls her voice. All right, so that was the topic sentence. We're going to go through the rest of this checklist as we move along. Lead-ins. So what are lead-ins? Lead-ins briefly identify who is talking to whom, where and when in the plot the passage occurs. And for MLA formatting, a comma follows the lead-in, preceding the quoted evidence. So I'll show you in just a moment. But the important thing about a lead-in is that it provides context for your reader before you give them your concrete detail. So if your reader doesn't really know what's going on, you can kind of place them in a good setting to understand what it is that you're going to provide as a piece of evidence. So let's look at the example. Lisa is not convinced that Star needs to make a statement on Khalil's death. When Uncle Carlos advises, she speaks with the detectives, comma. So you see how the comma is at the end there? This is clearly a sentence on its own, but for the sake of what a lead-in does, it's leading into your concrete detail or your evidence. Now let's look at the piece of evidence that the writer is providing. If you look on the bottom right over here, the quoted passage. Uncle Carlos sighs. Lisa, the sooner she talks to the detectives, the better. It will be a simple process. All she has to do is answer some questions. That's it. So if we go back to the lead-in example, we can kind of see how the writer has provided us context to who is talking, Lisa, and she's talking to her brother, Carlos, as well to whom, where and when it is happening, and when it occurs in the passage. So it's not exactly a direct example of, oh, this is happening in chapter 1, but it provides enough context for us to understand, okay, Lisa is clearly talking to Carlos about Star. And if we look at the piece of evidence, it's not clear that she is referring to Star, right? So that's why the lead-in is important. You want to include enough information so that when your reader is reading the concrete detail or evidence, they have a fuller understanding of what is going on and what is being said in the evidence that you provided. So again, what's important to note about the lead-in is that you are not including any sort of analysis. It's more or less fact because you're providing context of what's happening in the story. You're not yet providing your opinion, which you will do after the concrete detail. Now, what is evidence or concrete detail? So this is where you include an example or a quoted passage from the book to support your thesis statement. As it says in the definition, using quotation marks, the passage you choose provides evidence to support your claim. You must use quotation marks and proper citations to prevent plagiarism. This is why citations are important. It proves your credibility and also proves that you're not cheating and you're not plagiarizing off of someone else's work. And so if you look at the example over here, typically a citation would look like the one that says Orwell 52. But for the purposes of this essay, since we're only using one source, you only have to put the page number. So you just put the parentheses, the page number inside, and then close it with the punctuation at the end. Now this is key. Just like the comma after the lead-in, you need to put the punctuation after the piece of evidence. Clearly, that's it, period, is the sentence. But with MLA formatting, you need to put the punctuation after the citation. So just try to keep that in mind. All right, up next, your analysis or commentary. Per piece of evidence or concrete detail that you include in an essay, you are required to have a minimum of 2 sentences. Your analysis or commentary answers the question, so what? And it's immediately after the evidence or concrete detail that you just provided, and it supports your claim. In this case, your topic sentence, and therefore your thesis statement. This is when you're analyzing or close reading how this evidence connects back to your topic sentence and thesis statement. Here's an example of us analyzing the previous concrete detail in the last slide. This conversation between Lisa, Maverick, and Uncle Carlos shows how Star lacks control over her own voice. Although she comes from a strong family, she lacks the agency to speak out for herself. So, this is a minimum of 2 sentences analyzing what's going on in the example that we just gave. Let's look at what a concluding sentence is. So, concluding sentence summarizes the points you made in this paragraph to emphasize the importance of this paragraph's topic. It should also tie back to your thesis statement. This could also be a space to transition your readers from one idea to the next. And so here, the example has done it in 2 sentences. Typically, you want to do this in 1, but here we go. Star has yet to realize the power in her voice. It is clear her insight on the shooting matters and will have an influence as tensions rise around Khalil's death. Now, if we look at this concluding sentence, it kind of has a little bit of transition and building on what was just said in our analysis or commentary, but then transitions the reader into the next topic in relation to how Star's voice does matter and how that has an influence on Khalil's investigation. So let's look at this all together. Keep in mind that this is only one CD-COM-COM sequence. Typically, you'd have a second piece of concrete detail or evidence, and then 2 more sentences of commentary. So this paragraph would be a little bit longer. Let's read this together. Star's family is a controlling factor in the power of her voice. Lisa is not convinced that Star needs to make a statement on Khalil's death. When Uncle Carlos advises, she speaks with the detectives. Uncle Carlos sighs. Lisa, the sooner she talks to the detectives, the better. It will be a simple process. All she has to do is answer some questions. That's it. This conversation between Lisa, Maverick, and Carlos show how Star lacks control over her own voice. Although she comes from a strong family, she lacks agency to speak out for herself. Star has yet to realize the power in her voice. It is clear her insight on the shooting matters and will have an influence as tensions rise around Khalil's death. Now you can kind of see how all of this ties together, right? There's the topic sentence, and then the lead-in gives a little context for the evidence or example that you're going to provide, and then you analyze it, and your analysis keeps building until you summarize it at the end, and then transition the reader to the next topic. Now there's a typo in this paragraph that I want to point out. When you are quoting dialogue in your evidence, let's take a look at it really quick, right? Around your evidence, you have the quotation marks. But when you're quoting someone speaking, so essentially a quote within a quote, you do not use the double quotation marks, if you can kind of see it. So let's jump back to our concrete detail slide very briefly. If you look at this example over here, right, you can see the single quotation mark as soon as Uncle Carlos begins to speak. And there's still a typo. When you're quoting dialogue, you need to use the single quotation marks. That's only within these quotation marks. So you don't use the double quotation marks twice. You only use this regular double quotation mark for the beginning and the end of your evidence. If there's a piece of dialogue within it, then you would put the single quotation mark where the dialogue begins and then where it ends. So realistically, there would be 3 marks right there. Take a quick moment to answer the next 5 questions on time to climb. What are the important requirements in a body paragraph? This is just a quick check for understanding. Pause the video here and resume it when you're ready to continue wrapping up the body paragraph. Number 3, incorporating appeals. Diving in how to incorporate at least one appeal into your body paragraphs. So as we went over in the introduction, how do you incorporate an appeal? And those are logos, ethos, and pathos. This is actually a very subtle process. It's not something that's super obvious and in your face when you're writing or incorporating this into your essay. How do you incorporate an appeal into your body paragraph? You can do this by writing a concluding or topic sentence. You can choose your quotes based off of one of these 3 appeals, or you can explain in your analysis and commentary. And I think the third one, explaining in your analysis or commentary, is probably the most direct way that you can say, look, this shows logos because blah, 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 blah. So today we're just going to look at topic sentence and analysis. How can you incorporate these things into that? Analysis is pretty straightforward, like I just mentioned, so there's not really an example for that one. But let's look at topic sentence first. So topic sentences. Let's take the topic sentence we wrote earlier and incorporate logos into it. At the first bullet point, logos, prompt number 3. Star's family is a controlling factor in the power of her voice, so the adults in her life presume Star making a statement will suffice in getting justice for Khalil. Let's try and incorporate logos if we were going to use prompt number 2. Microaggressions have put a strain on Star's relationships, making it difficult for Star to accept herself. Now, how are both of these incorporating logos? Both of these topic sentences are using logic to persuade the reader. Simply put, if A, then B, but then ties back to your thesis or prompt. And if we look at these 2 examples, right, Star's family is a controlling factor in the power of her voice. If A, then B. So the adults in her life presume Star making a statement will suffice in getting justice for Khalil. So your logos topic sentence needs to kind of have that if A, then B type of structure. Here's another example if you wanted to use ethos or pathos. So prompt number 3, ethos. Star's family is a primary factor in the power of her voice. Uncle Carlos and her mother Lisa are the driving forces in whether or not Star should make a statement. Ethos usually relies on other credible sources in argument writing, but in this case, you can find credible evidence to prove that Carlos and Lisa are the ones pressing Star in a way that isn't wholly justice for Khalil or agency in her voice. For pathos, prompt number 2, at Williamson and in Garden Heights, oppressive institutions cause Star to relive her traumas. For pathos, we can follow this topic sentence with evidence that shows Star's struggles, and then convince or get your reader to empathize with Star. So as I mentioned for analysis earlier, in the same way that you would analyze a piece of evidence, here you would just further push the agenda that you're supporting your essay prompt with one of the appeals. So as simple as, this shows logos because blank, or maybe Carlos is using logos to explain to Lisa that if Star does this, so on and so forth. Here's an example based off of if we transformed the example topic sentence into incorporating logos. Star's family is a controlling factor in the power of her voice. So the adults in her life presume Star making a statement will suffice in getting justice for Khalil. Lisa and Maverick are not convinced that Star needs to make a statement on Khalil's death. When Uncle Carlos advises, she speaks with the detectives. Uncle Carlos sighs. Lisa, the sooner she talks to the detectives, the better. It'll be a simple process. All she has to do is answer some questions. That's it. Carlos is trying to reason with Lisa and Maverick because he thinks this will draw Khalil's case to a close. He's trying to persuade them to think that as long as Star makes a statement, everything will be done and over with. So with each of these 4 parts of the body paragraph in this example, we can kind of see how logos has been incorporated into all 4 of them. Now, your appeal can be just as intricate, or it can just be in one of those things. It doesn't have to be in each part of your body paragraph. All I'm asking for you to do is include one of the appeals somewhere, whether again that's just the topic sentence or even included in your analysis. Alright, so the last thing we have to go over is concluding paragraph. Thanks for tuning in on this video. Go ahead and find the next one to get a little overview of what goes in a conclusion paragraph.